Welcome back, gang. It's Deltia from Deltiasgaming.com, and in this video, I'm going to answer two questions. What's the best solo class in ESO? In what tier would I rank each class in ESO in 2022? Update 33 launched, and it took me over 2 weeks to run all 6 classes through Veteran Vatashram Solo Arena, both Magic and Stamina. I used a simple setup for Magic and Stamina without Mythics or Trials gear, which carries your survivability, damage, and resource sustain. That way, when you strip a class down to its bare bones, something the average player would experience, how do these classes really perform paired next to each other? I rated these classes in 4 simple categories: raw damage, survivability, ease of play, and resource sustain. Let's start with the C tier, and last and certainly least, that's my least favorite, and that's a Magic NECRO. Before you have a panic attack that I ranked the Magic NECRO last, let me explain why it's in this last place. The strength of the Magic NECRO is very high raw damage, and in group play, the sought-after ultimate Colossus. But in a solo context, you must sacrifice your strength to survive and sustain. For instance, with a fully optimized macro bar setup for damage, you'll be doing nothing but rotating damage over time abilities, buffs, and babysitting blast bones. Within 10 seconds, you'll be out of magic, and with no running skills and gear that increase your resource sustain, you're going to be out of magic very quick and frustrated. Naturally, you'll swap into resource sustaining skills like Elemental Drain from Destruction Staff and Consuming Trap from Soul Magic skill line, but you'll need to drop 2 abilities, which are usually damage and survivability. Great, your Magic NECRO now can sustain, but you're either going to hit like a noodle or die like a mosquito, sacrificing your #1 strength, raw damage, for sustain or survivability. You can't have them both. But it gets worse. Far worse. Let me explain. Macro was the worst in terms of ease of play. Compared to my Magpar that can press 1 button in No Death Vatashram Arena and Veteran Maelstrom Arena, yes, I did this, see my previous video, I'm spending my entire time managing what feels like a gazillion buffs and timers that don't seek up, feel impactful, or fun, like a Dragonknight. I'm constantly recasting 2.5 second blast bones, and the results were multiple deaths and frustration because it was over the top, clunky, and unintuitive. I couldn't take my eyes off my timers, and there were so many things to manage, I felt like I was running a daycare with 10 2-year-olds running around screaming. Survivability falls into the same category as sustain. The moment you start to add survivability or resource sustain skills, you lower the damage significantly. In group play, the macro will rock, but you need to adjust in order to survive and sustain, and the class feels just weak. It's funny to say this and put this in comparison to solo PvE context, where my Magic NECRO in PvP is literally my favorite class. You can blow up entire groups, destroy people, and be super survivable. He sees me. He sees me. No, he doesn't. It's a trap! Batman got him! Bang! Welcome to Cyrodiil, friends! In solo PvE, the sustain is garbage, it's way too clunky, and it's a hot mess express to manage all the buffs and the 2.5 seconds blast bones. My least favorite by far. And next up, in the C tier list, you guessed it, a Stamina NECRO. Remember all those things I said about the macro? Well, just stack stamina and you'll get pretty much the exact same scenario. Mind-numbing raw damage, but playing solo without Pill Order, Vicious Ophidian, or someone holding your hand, healing for you, tanking for you, giving you butterfly kisses at night before bedtime, you're left with a clunky 2-handed carve heavy attack comboing mess. So what made Stamcro better than the macro? The fact that Mortal Coil was really good in resource sustain and healing, and I can use Carve as my main spammable and still do decent amount of damage, having a nice shield and a really long damage over time. Not to mention, I can use an Execute like Executioner from the 2-handed skill line. Just because something is new doesn't make it great, and the Necromancer solo is an utter disaster without the carry gear sets. Is this the same in group? Absolutely not. Where the NECRO shines is the Colossus ultimate and huge damage with other party members providing resource sustain and healing. That's where the class shines. But solo, you couldn't pay me to play a NECRO. Never mind. Yeah, you could.
If you don't write checks, how do you pay these guys?
Straight cash, homie.
Straight cash, homie.
Moving on to the B tier list, and it's the Necro's cousin in my least favorite class in the entirety of the Elder Scrolls Online. Drum roll, please. It's the Warden. The 10th spot, we have the Stand-em, and that's our first B tier class, and B- is how I'd rank it. The Warden has the exact same issues the Necro does. In the right situations, the amount of damage these two classes can produce is astonishing. The problem is you need specific gear sets to unleash the full potential, not to mention a super complex bar setup stacking as much bleeds as possible with Screaming Cliff Racer and other skills. Playing solo without Pale Order, good luck getting one or two cast off before you have to backpedal, post up, heal yourself relentlessly, lowering your damage output, and anything else you can bring to the table. Sure, you can run skills like Lotus Blossom and do a little bit more healing while you're being offensive, but you also sacrifice that skill placement for something that can produce a lot of damage, taking away the strength of the class, and that's raw damage. So your result, survive, hit like a noodle, or do raw damage. The survivability of Stand-em is improved over the Necro in my opinion due to the passive Bond with Nature, giving 1260 health whenever anytime your animal companion skill ends. You gain some passive healing while playing offensive, but it's nothing in comparison to the Sorcerer, Nightblade, and praise Talos, the almighty Templar.
Praise be to Talos!
Overall, the Stand-em is fun, looks cool, does a lot of damage, and in group PvE, the right hands, it has slightly better survivability, but the abysmal resource sustain makes it B tier solo, and for me, something I don't enjoy without a specific gear loadout carrying my resource sustain. Now we have the Magic Warden, which is in a much better spot because I think it takes advantage of the new hybridization a lot more than the Stand-em. Let me explain. Now you can use stamina-based skills, which scale in effectiveness off whatever's highest, allowing the Warden, specifically the Magic Warden, to change morphs from Deep Fissure to Subterranean Assault, freeing up magic sustain and increasing our damage and ease of play. The Magnan can use stamina offstat more efficiently for damage and use skills like Ellie Drain for major breach and further optimize resource sustain, damage, and survivability. Now you have a hard-hitting class with good resource sustain, survivability, but the downside is the Magnan lacks any sense of identity. Is it a Frost class? Is it melee? Is it range? The Magnan really doesn't know what it is. You have a lot of options in terms of a main spammo, but then you have a hard-hitting, semi-melee type skill that you want to be in close for. Meaning the Magnan plays this goofy hybrid and lacks the class identity that any other class in the Elder Scrolls Online just doesn't. The Magnan is average in a lot of departments and feels like it took a massive advantage of the hybridization and moved up my ranking. Next up is the A tier classes, and one that made a massive improvement due to the hybridization, and that's the Dragonknight. The Stamina Dragonknight is up first, and I rank it A- tier. Previously, the Stamina Dragonknight lacked any form of survivability without Pale Order, but one fundamental change altered this. And that's Burning Embers, the magic-based morph now healing per second rather than the end of the skill's duration. Thus, it allows even a Stamina Dragonknight to swap morphs and still be effective, getting about 2,000 heals per second in solo, off of a single class ability. Combine Burning Embers with another class skill like Cinderstorm, and now you're looking at 4,000 to 5,000 heals per second, giving a massive boost in the survivability, and can hang in there with other classes. Unlike the Necromancer, the Stamina Dragonknight's damage over time seems fluid, easy to maintain, and without the need for babysitting a 2.5 second skill like Blast Bones. And unlike the Warden, the Dragonknight can rely on Battle Roar for resource sustain using ultimates, and furthermore, the charge trait and the combustion passive combined means you can front bar the charge trait with the poison glyph, and your stamina sustain and dot pressure is through the roof. So why isn't the Dragonknight number one? Well, the damage over times are very long lasting, and sometimes in solo instances, you don't need something that's going to last 14 seconds. You need burst, quick, hard-hitting damage now. Your ultimate Standard of Might, which is incredible for damage, is not that mobile and lasts a very long time, so you don't see the use of this in every single situation. And it doesn't have nearly the survivability of some of the other magic classes in the higher tier. Stam DK has come a very long way, but it's just a little bit behind, and especially in group play, watch out for this class. Next up is the Magic-based Dragonite, and I would rank that A tier. What the Magic Dragonite does better than the Stam Dragonite is resource sustain and healing. You can use skills like Draw Essence to do not only big-time AoE damage, but huge, massive healing. You can use skills like Elemental Drain for major breach and minor magic steal, thus allowing the Magic Dragonite to play more aggressive without sacrificing damage, sustain, and healing. And this is the ultimate strength of magic builds in comparison to stamina. Sure, stamina-based characters can sit there and spam Car for a big shield and survive, but the true advantage in where these classes shine, magic specifically, is you can just throttle down on damage and get healed while you're doing that, and that's exactly what the Dragonite and other magic classes have in its advantage. The Magic Dragonite has mind-numbing AoE damage, damage over time, and sustain, but it lacks in simplicity and ease of play. Moreover, it doesn't have all the healing the other classes do, but it's a massive improvement from the previous patch and the previous years. Dragonite solo, it's amazing, and in group, fantastic. Next up is the Stamina Templar, and I ranked it the A tier, and it epitomizes ease of play. Unlike the previous stamina classes, I was able to survive without using carve spam, making the Stampar jump ahead of other classes, partly because of Restoring Focus and the Orc passive. Restoring Focus gives you about 2,000 heals per second while you're standing in a room, and the Orc passive gives you right around 2,000 health every 4 seconds while you're doing damage. The Stampar survivability wasn't number 1 for stamina class, but it was up there for this reason. The ease of play for the Stampar is where this class shines. It's the exact opposite of the Necro. Put up 1, maybe 2 dots, throttle down your main spammable biting jabs, and you're just gonna melt everything. I didn't even use an execute ability because my main spammable jabs was so strong it outperformed it, and it just made it simpler freeing up a bar slot. Thus I ran Camouflage Hunter, giving me major brutality while using my jab spam, and just purely slotting it gave me major savagery, so I didn't have to get these 2 buffs from potions. Very, very strong. Sustain on a Stamplar is up there as well, with skills like Repentance, Restoring Focus, and magic-based abilities like Ritual of Retribution that does massive AoE damage and scales very effectively in the game's current form. You could even swap out more things, go from Power of Light to Purifying Light to get even more healing, allowing the class to do well without the need for exotic gear. So what's the downside? Well, the Stampar still doesn't have the survivability of other classes, nor does it have the raw damage. The Stampar really is very simple, and it's a strong thing to pick up and play if you want something that's easy and does not require Pale Order or Vicious Ophidian to do some of the best content in the game solo. Next up is the Stamina Nightblade in A+ tier. The Stam Blade is the single target raw damage killer with just unmatched damage. There's really nothing like it for single target. It's skills like Incapacitating Strikes and Relentless Focus in combination that makes it so strong. You even have passives that give you extra critical damage, penetration from the flank, and more critical for slotting abilities. Thus you end up with an absolute single target killer in solo content. Another strength of the Stamina Nightblade is really strong resource sustain. You have skills like Incapacitating Strikes, rewarding light and heavy attacks, giving you some resource sustain. Leeching Strikes, also giving you back resource sustain for light or heavy attacks, something you're already doing. And the Executioner passive, allowing you to get back resources for killing things. What this means is, throttle down on damage and you're getting back resources without the need for some complex gear skill setup. Not to mention you have 2 hard-hitting, magic-based abilities, Twisting Path and Dark Shade. So you're not just limited and pigeonholed into casting just stamina abilities for damage. Moreover, Healthy Offering. It's a solid choice for a burst heal, magic-based, freeing up your stamina for damage rather than survivability and buffs. The downside, it's just not that simple. You have a bit more complex rotation, ultimate usage, managing your potions, and survivability just isn't the same as the other tiers. You also don't have the AoE as a Dragonite, you don't have the healing of a Templar, and the simplicity of a Magic SORC. Stamblade remains my favorite playstyle for stamina-based characters in the Elder Scrolls Online, day one until now. It was very hard not putting in the S tier, but when we ran them back to back to back, it was pretty clear that it wasn't at the higher tier. I absolutely melted single targets, but it was a bit more complex, a bit more clunky, and not as survivable as the next group. Speaking of that, the Sorcerer is up next. The Sorcerer is up next, and I rank it A+, and it's very hard not to put the Magic SORC in S tier. And if there's any argument to be made that my tier list is hot garbage, this is it. In the solo context, the SORC does, well, everything well. Resource sustain is a breeze with passives like Capacitator, increasing your magic recovery by 10%, Power Stone, reducing the cost of your ultimates by 15%, and Rebate, giving you back stamina or magicka when your Daedric summoning abilities end. Combine this with LE Drain from Destruction Staff and it's easy peasy. In terms of raw damage, single target sorcerers absolutely melt, especially with base skills like Greater Storm Atronach. The single target pressure that Storm Atronach provides is astonishing, not to mention it lasts 28 seconds. And with the reduced cost of ultimate passive, you can almost maintain this at 70 to 80% while active. Thus, your Storm Atro seems to always be up, always zapping. And you don't have to get Mage's Guild or Sigil Order to be really powerful out the gate and solo. In survivability, that's an absolute breeze with S tier skills like Critical Surge, giving you health when critically striking. Basically, it's a mini pale order. But if that weren't enough, you get Blood Magic passive, giving you back even more health when you're hitting a dark magic ability like Crystal Frags. Ease of play is also good with a couple of different loadouts. No pet, 1 pet, 2 pet. They all basically work. The pets give you really good buffs, debuffs, and you can use them for healing, decoy, and damage. Well then, so why is the Sorcerer not number 1? If we do it solo, we do without Mythics and Trials gear, it really lacks a lot of AoE. And when I was running it back to back, it was simple, easy, but it just didn't breeze through like the other classes I'm about to list. It's a shocker, but I put Stamina Sorcerer ahead of it. S- tier, and that's what I would rank the Stamina Sorcerer, and I know that's a bit of a shocker. But when I ran these back to back, the Stam SORC just had massive AoE, and that was the big difference. All of the above still applies to the Stam SORC and the Magic SORC. Ease of play, insane survivability, great resource sustain. Just one big improvement, that's AoE damage. With skills like Hurricane, Caltrops, Carve, you just melt massive groups where the Mag SORC just didn't. And now with the hybridization, the Stamina Sorcerer can take advantage of a lot of cool magic abilities like Curse, Fury, the pets. It just scales well, and you can dip into both resource stats, magic and stamina, to great healing, damage, and it just works very, very well. When I ran both Mag and Stam SORC, the truth was the Stamina Sorcerer effortlessly mowed through entire groups of mobs. Sure, the Stam SORC didn't do nearly as good single target, but the entirety of Vatashram Hollow was much easier on a Stam SORC. AoE pulse, deleted. Single target with the Storm Atro, melted. Survivability with 20 mobs beating on me, Carve, Crit Surge, it's insane. I'd highly recommend this class if someone wants an S tier survivability class solo, big time AoE, ease of play, and very unique solo experience. And moving on to our top 2, it's very hard to rank the next class number 2, but that's the Magic NIGHTBLADE. S tier, and that's the Magic NIGHTBLADE. Deep breath, there's a reason I didn't rank it number 1. Let me start by saying the Magic NIGHTBLADE does everything well, but not number 1 in every category. You can do mind-numbing single target and AoE damage with skills like Sap Essence and Swallow Souls, healing you while doing damage. You have an in-class execute with 28-meter range, keeping you safe at distance, and a huge advantage for most players. You have great resource sustain with skills like Elemental Drain and Siphoning Spell, combining damage, healing, and sustain. You have the most ultimate generation possible with an ultimate like Soul Harvest on your front, giving you back ultimate upon kills, which stacks with the Fighter's Guild passive Banish the Wicked, giving you even more ultimate back if you slot a Fighter's Guild ability on your front. This is the only class where you can roll ultimates back to back. So what's the downside? Why did the Magic NIGHTBLADE not win? The Magport does everything the best except raw damage. Ease of play, it was much easier. Resource sustain, and actually out-resource sustain the MAGBLADE. In healing and survivability, it's not even a question. Magpar, S+ tier. Here's why. And shocker, the best is the Magpar, with AoE puncturing sweeps, healing you for the damage done, purifying light, a hard-hitting ability that heals you while standing in the after effects. Channel focus, also healing you and giving you resource sustain. Thus, with these things running, you can expect about 10,000 heals per second or more while doing damage. Not to mention you have a skill like Living Dark. You put that on with these other things, and you could tank the entirety of Craglorn without your health bar moving. I'll put it like this, if you're a competent Magpar with decent skill and decent gear, unless you miss a heavy attack or a one-shot mechanic, you can basically solo everything in the game. The resource sustain was better than any other class, and just Elemental Drain and Channel Focus allowed you to run 2 damage over time effects like Blazing Spear and Unstable Wall. 2 front bar dots like Barb Trap or Degeneration and Purifying Light. You end up with a super simplistic, hard-hitting, AoE melting indomitable force. I thought of every reason not to rank the Templar #1, but even chat was dumbfounded at the damage and healing. Look, when 5 people are watching the stream and they ask you constantly, is this on veteran? You're just effortlessly mowing through mobs and it looks like it's a normal run. That's what the Templar did with the exact same gear, the exact same champion points. Just the Templar skills and a couple of different factors, it was absolutely destroying effortlessly. Well, gang, that's the video. Where was I right? Where was I wrong? Let me know if you want me to do more of these tier lists in the comments below. Parse Lord, Group PvE, PvP, and if you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that like, subscribe, and then look in the link in the description where I'll have a tier list written guide in case this information changes in the future. Thanks for watching.